Hello everybody, my name is Mara Trepanier, and today I'm going to be talking to you about creating writing assignments as a first year teacher. This is something that I have definitely been looking at and experiencing on my own as a first year teacher going into the English classroom, so it's something that I want to research and kind of delve into with you. So today we're going to be going over a couple of things, and I'll just say that with you with the learning objectives for today's presentation. So after going over this presentation, you should be able to understand the necessary components of a writing assignment, understand the importance of intentionality in content creation, be able to apply the different types of writing assignments to assignments in your own class, and be able to create writing assignments that reflect the necessary components to a writing assignment. And so after kind of going over this, we should be able to do that together. So kind of one of the first things I wanted to delve into this topic with you is the importance of writing in the classroom. And I know that as English teachers, we have a very deep understanding of how this is important to student knowledge acquisition. But there's a lot of research to back this up, and specifically, kind of the research that I had been doing is how research or how writing itself is actually an active learning process. So when we're writing, we are connecting the dots between the things that we know in a way that helps students to kind of solidify what exactly it is we are learning. And so, just kind of going over this, there's a lot of research that we can mention that brings this up. And let's see here. So, one of the sources that I had read, Perspectives of Writing Related to Critical Thinking and Knowledge Creation, argues that the act of writing allows students to create bridges and foundations for critical thinking. And specifically, they say that students become more effective writers through deepening engagement and commitment and lively association with other students and teachers in fields of study that they want to write about. So that's something that I was thinking and kind of brainstorming what that would look like in my own classroom. And so I don't need to cover this much because we as English teachers know that writing is important. And all right, so moving forward, what are the necessary components of a writing assignment? So the first thing that I would say that as writing English teachers we need to understand are the state standards that we are expected to abide by. And this is going to help wonders while you're creating your curriculum. Just as a result of the No Child Left Behind Act, each state has standards that as teachers we are expected to present the content that represents those things to our students so that they can learn that material. And so this is something that can help a lot when you're looking at what you're expected as a teacher to create for your students, what writing assignments you specifically need at that grade level. You're going to find that all in the national state standards for your state. And so one example of this is that in grade 11 you need to create an assignment that will allow students to peer review, will use persuasion, and understand and allow students to understand the revision process. So a natural writing assignment that you would create with that is a persuasion paper where students are peer editing and they're also revising and experiencing the revision process. So that's just one small example of that. And another thing that you need to consider are the local content concerns. So you need to talk to your department head and see if there's anything that you as a teacher are expected to specifically put into your content creation and any assignments that you're mandated to implement into your classroom. And so that's something I would recommend you do right up the gate at the beginning of the year, and just see, and that will help you plan for the future. But the biggest thing I would say when you're beginning to brainstorm what writing assignments that you want to create, you should be looking at your state standards and seeing what is expected of your students so you can help them reach that goal. And so one thing that can really help you also is to understand where your students are at. So one of the sources that I was reading was talking about curriculum-based measurement, and I have a lot of friends in the field of education who are using this right now in their own schools, where basically through your weekly testing of students, and this is small, like low risk tests, you are seeing what knowledge students are acquiring and what knowledge they're not. And when students are not acquiring knowledge, you are pivoting your instruction to meet the needs of the student. And basically, this is making sure that there are no holes left in the student's learning, and you're able to kind of meet each student where they're at. This obviously takes a lot of work because you're kind of altering your instruction for each individual student, but this is also the education that each student needs. So that's just something that I was looking at and thinking about how to implement in my own classroom. But when you're creating content objectives for your students, this is something that could really help, because you could be creating objectives based on the curriculum-based measurement that you're taking. So moving on here. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is creating writing assignments that have an objective. And what I mean by objective is that there is an intentional reason that you as the teacher are creating this assignment. And that intentional reason can be that you are creating a writing assignment that aligns with the state standards and also fills the gaps that your students have in the class. So, for example, if students are expected to do a presentation on to practice oral speaking in your class, then you create an objective for an assignment that would line up with that. And so that's what I mean by creating an objective. So writing can be an important tool to help students to gain necessary skills, but teaching writing can be a really daunting topic, especially for first-year teachers stepping into a new field. And the need for literacy is at an all-time high. And actually, in the last 10 years, there's been actually signs that students' literacy levels are going down, despite the fact that we've been noticing this and trying to alter it. But a lot of things that are being done is implementing writing in the classroom cross-curriculum. So kind of where we're going to go with this is that in one of my sources, let me see, her name's Langer. She wrote Beating the Odds, Teaching Middle and High School Students to Read and Write Well. She actually went to some of the most high-performing high schools in America. And something that she found across the board is that the best English teachers what they're doing is they're creating specific goals for their students and creating writing assignments that match up with that. And that they're not teaching to a test, they're not teaching out of a book, they are specifically creating content to fuel their students' learning. And so that is kind of what she says across the board, is that in these schools where they are consistently creating students who are achieving very well in the field of English, the teachers are using specific objectives in their writing instruction. So that's something that I kind of moved forward and applied. And so once you have an objective in mind, there's a lot of ways you can go with that. You can go ahead and there's going to be resources for you to go ahead and use. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So there's a lot of resources. I found a couple resources through journal articles, Troutner's Common Core in Content Creation and Content Tools, and then also resources like Teachers Pay Teachers. There's a lot of resources out there to help you once you have an objective in mind and kind of help you to brainstorm where you want your students to go. And then something else we're going to talk about is ways to use objective-oriented writing assignments in the classroom. So now we understand how to make an objective, things to consider when creating a writing assignment, but how specifically are ways that we're going to use this, and what are the different ways we can use it? So depending on the objective, the teacher can determine what sort of writing assignments to implement. So this can be via the more traditional literature response or argumentative paper, or via small, low-risk assignments that promotes student critical thinking. And so the bigger ones are going to be papers, and the smaller ones could be low risk things that are going to help student learning and help with students discussing in class. So I'm going to give you guys an example of the larger one, which would be so I'll give you an objective and you'll come up with some writing assignments that meet the intentional needs of the class's objective. So for the first one, I'm going to model this for you. I'll model this for you with a high-risk learning objective for a 10th grade classroom. And the objective of this assignment is that students must read a piece of world literature and must experience peer review. So I've looked at the state standards, I've seen what's expected, and then I've kind of thought about ways that I could specifically implement this in my class. And so basically I could allow students to look at a specific, choose from a selection of books and then go from there. And then they would be able to write a paper based on that. And so we're going to start with the objectives and then go from there. And then, but there are some other ways that you can do it. So what are some ways that you specifically think you could do it? So you could use a graphic organizer to show different perspectives in a book. And you could also use annotation in your book while your students are reading specific books to help them come up with ideas to go forward. And so that's just some ideas. I hope that you guys have learned what you have learned from this process, and I look forward to hearing from you. Bye.